So I'm with my friend, mental health professional David Friedler, who was talking with me about his recent work over the last number of years with a front group of Scientology known as Narconon, and which settled in a favorable way. And I asked Dave, would you be willing to talk about what your research told you about their programs and your opinions for the public? And you said, sure, Steve. So I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to share what you were approached by some people who had been harmed by Narconon or by lawyers who were representing people.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Well, let's start with your credentials. Why are you an expert witness? What do you got as a background?
Okay, well, I have a dual kind of a background. I have a couple of master's degrees. I'm a MPH, Master of Public Health, which I got at Yale in the 70s with a focus in health services administration, and particularly in mental health administration. So prior to that, I have a master's in counseling, school psychology, and I've done an array of things with that currently in private practice and psychotherapy. But I've managed buildings, drug and alcohol, notably psychiatric settings, long-term care, and so forth with behavioral units, and have had my hand in an interest in substance abuse and mental health as it relates to standard of care in institutions, which is why now they hire me as an expert in that, and because I've had so much experience in regulation, managing facilities, and in mental health practice, that I put those things together, having to deal with numbers of regulators at different levels and surveys. The long and short of that is, over 45 years at this point, I've managed to acquire a certain knowledge base in what you can and cannot do in an institution called treatment.
You're the expert. I'm impressed. So, can you summarize in a number of minutes your research and what you came up with and your opinions about Narconon and Scientology?
Okay, I was approached by two attorneys in Nevada in 2015 to talk about 7 cases, actually. So I wrote a report which got translated and adjusted to meet the specifics of 6 other cases, all of which settled without a deposition or a trial, incidentally, in the favor of the plaintiff who I was representing. So the plaintiffs in these cases were young people who had been paying privately thousands of dollars to go to Narconon, which is touted, depending on who you're talking to, as a treatment facility for substance-dependent, specifically opioid-dependent people. I say depending who you're talking to because if it's the IRS, they are a church. If you're talking to the feds, it's an educational facility. But if you're talking to people who want to pay $30,000 a month to send their kids there, it's substance abuse treatment, which is how they get into trouble. At least I thought that was promising because you call something treatment, you have to be treating someone, and you can't just make this stuff up. There are evidence-based practices which are regulated, and NREP, which is the agency, the national agency, a scholarly agency which has standardizes what we call evidence-based practices, and there are professionals and panels who go through this. Anyway, there are 342 of them.
And this is for the protection of the public, basically, so frauds and scam artists shouldn't be able to harm public.
Right, it goes to clinicians as well as people employing alleged clinicians. When I say alleged clinicians, again, Narconon doesn't have trained, certified people. They do things like certify their own people, but who are they? They're this church, and they use the Church of Scientology dogma to treat people. It's completely inappropriate and often quite harmful.
Yes, and especially with opioid addiction killing 59,000, I think it was 59,000 Americans this last year, and is getting worse.
Yes.
and people need to be alert that, especially if they're vulnerable and desperate to help a loved one, you don't just look up online opioid treatment centers or drug treatment centers. You have to do your due diligence and be really careful.
I'm sorry, there are ways to do the due diligence. There's licensure, there is accreditation by the Commission and Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, and those are standards, high-level, non-governmental standards, which people have to adhere to. The real problem with what Narconon does is that it takes vulnerable people, young people primarily, who not only have opioid and other substance abuse problems, but what we call dual diagnosis, meaning there's something else going on in the mental health arena as well, usually depression, bipolar disorder, things like that, anxiety. The cases that I focused on specifically had to do with young people who were dually diagnosed, had bipolar disorder in both cases, and the 5 others that we split it off to, and serious addiction problems. And what they call treatment is putting these people, well, first indoctrinating them so that they're completely subordinated to the dogma.
To Scientology's dogma.
To just the Scientology
right.
dogma. That's the treatment modality. You cannot question, you cannot argue, you become one of them. It's a whole insidious practice, and lots, and you've written and interviewed and you've done a lot in that field. This is their what they call treatment ring. It's a big problem. In these cases, these people suffered serious physical and mental harm. The treatment involves not only adhering to the dogma and getting kind of hypnotized into what they say they need to do, and being put in sorrows, like sorrow.
The purification rundown, what they call it?
Purification rundown. And they turn this into punishment if they object. So you can be in a sauna 4 or 5 hours with a cup of water and mega doses of vitamins, which they say are going to help. Now they say that, of course, there's always evidence that sauna is good for you and vitamins are good for you. Well, who's going to argue with that? But when you take and prescribe sauna and vitamins as medical treatment, you're in deep trouble because you have to have a medical license to do that. You can't tell anyone in a nursing home or a hospital, here's a vitamin, I'll just give this to you while a nurse. You look like you need a vitamin. You can't do that, even if you are a nurse. You have to have a doctor's order. Somebody has to be watching the store and say, this is going to work, this is not going to work, this is good for you or not. There was nobody medically qualified watching the store. So it was pretty glaring. Not only that, these treatment facilities are remote. You cannot leave. If you want to leave, they'll put you out on in the desert in Nevada and say, okay, call an Uber or something. And there's no place to go.
So the isolation, the dependency, the indoctrination into the Scientology belief system is being promoted as a cure to serious drug treatments.
Now, with anything you do, I mean, many people just recover from drug or substance abuse, alcohol, just because they do. They decide one day they're going to stop or
stop abusing.
Stop abusing themselves and go out and live it. That's a good number, 40-50% just do. Those people can end up in treatment and would have stopped anyway. Coincidentally, there's some clinical evidence that people have gotten better in this environment, but there's no study that they can come up with because what they do is so amorphous and a moving target and so kind of crazy that you can't break down what they're doing to be able to study it because it's always changing and it's so confused because their definitions change. They redefine words like, ethics. To have it come out in a confused, garbled manner, which is almost hypnotic, which is kind of a technique. So people are really talk about alternative facts. this is nothing but alternative facts.
Mm-hmm.
This is just garbage.
Mm-hmm. So can you share like a specific story of the kinds of abuse in addition to the saunas and the vitamins? What deleterious effects happened? Because I think what you're trying to say is this group is keeping people from legitimate treatment that's been proven to help, but they also are just trying to suck people into the belief system permanently.
They suck people into the belief system and say, leave your psychiatrist at home, because we don't believe in that. Quite frankly, AA has the same approach. People do get better at AA. People swear by it. Many mental health professionals and physicians swear by AA. Guess what? There's no evidence. It's not an evidence-based practice. They don't actually do anything that they claim is treatment. What they do is treatment-like. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem to hurt people. This does. Maybe.
Well, I know people who claim AA hurt them very dramatically, by the way. I have a page up on my old website on all of that. But anyway, let's stay on Scientology.
In this particular case, I can talk about this, and I won't go into the name of the case because I'm getting into diagnostic issues. There were 7 of them. But in all of these cases, whatever it was they did, they have group issues, they have group things, and indoctrination sessions, and rote regurgitation of factoids, which they say are gospel. It's really, this has this religious overtone. It's insidious. The net outcome in these cases was serious, measurable, physical and psychiatric, psychological harm. So people's conditions not only got worse, but they had permanent damage. People, if they're deprived of water and sauna and are going through an abusive situation, can lose contact with reality. So in these particular cases, there were psychoses developed. Kids were hallucinating. Kids became delusional. And they were borderline situations with complex psychiatric pictures before they went in. And when they left, there was real damage. So these cases were what I call a slam dunk from an expert witness. There was nothing they could say to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm. So in your professional opinion, would you say that all Narconon programs should be closed if you had...
It's not just what I think. It's many states in a number of countries have said you can't operate here. It's every day. I think, depending on who's watching the story, like quite frankly, the politics of those states.
Right.
Psychology is very powerful. You don't want to mess with them ordinarily on the political. Not only that, they have infiltrated even the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities, according to reputable sources.
Wow.
So that even those agencies are accredited with some facilities in California where the licensure is different, and they do actually have medical backup. But how that happened is beyond me, other than I'm told that a relative is somewhere on the board who is related to one of the principals in Scientology. I'm not making this up.
No, I'm sure you're not. This is their MO, actually. They connive, they bend the law, they dig up information on people in the past to blackmail them, to offer them huge amounts of money, etc. But I think you hit the main key points that I wanted to cover. You are an expert on institutions and professional ethics and practices. You've looked into this program and you say there's nothing that fits the recognized standards of care that can actually help people.
It has no socially redeeming value, as my mother used to say. There's no socially redeeming anything about this. There's no reliable or valid practice that these people are doing, representing themselves as practitioners.
Right.
They get into trouble. You can call yourself a religion and get away with quite a lot, quite frankly. You can call yourself an educational religious organization and not a treatment center. You can do lots of things. But once you use the word treatment, and they did, that was your Achilles heel as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Others.
Right.
And when I hear the word treatment, I hear the word regulation, and there are standards of care, and that's my field.
Right.
There is a regulatory standard of care, and if you're not, it's either you do or you don't. You adhere to it. And I work for the defense as well as the plaintiff. Sometimes claims are made and they're not correct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This was so clearly indefensible that they didn't even depose me. I gave them the paper, they settled.
Right. So you talked about how people get better on their own, whether it's a point in their life where they realize I need to stop drinking or I need to stop using this drug. And I wonder if you could just take a minute and talk about placebo effect, where someone in authority is telling them if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get better. Can you comment on that effect?
Yeah, there is something called placebo effect, and there's a lot been written about it. If you have faith that something is going to help or hurt you, it will. Mm-hmm. Depending how strongly you're indoctrinated or get into the belief system. Mm-hmm. And it can be used very beneficially, as can, quite frankly, hypnosis. Right. And the hands of a skilled practitioner, even placebo, which you can't do ethically, you can't hand someone a pill, but you can put someone in a supportive but benign environment and have someone believe they're going to get better, and that will happen. Yeah. There are clear ethical boundaries there and guidelines about what's ethical practice and what is not, and that's a whole lecture in itself.
Right. So any last words as we wrap up? If you are suffering with opioid addiction or know someone who is, what should you do to avoid groups like Narconon?
Well, you go to sources which are reputable, who you do know, who you do trust, like the state where people. No, let's back up. Let's make a mistake. Go to your doctor. Go to your therapist. Go to someone who is a specialist in the field in addiction medicine. Mm-hmm. Go to any good treatment facility that I know in the state of Massachusetts, which is licensed. Right. Talk to any and ask them for referral. Do not hunt and fish on the internet. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and they'll tell you what you want to hear, and they're lying.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your willingness to do this and to step up and speak out against the cult. Did you have any trepidations when you took the case that you might get harassed or anything?
Yes, I had to sign off that I wouldn't specifically divulge, their Narconon books, and I haven't. Uh-huh. This is all public. All of these cases are public information. Mm-hmm. These cases versus Narconon, and there are 7 of them that at least I worked on. Right. It can be researched, and so I'm not saying anything I haven't said in writing that hasn't been going through testimony that I haven't been sworn in to say. Right. Ostensibly. So I'm not ready to tie out the bag. This has all been heard and all been settled in court of law. So I was just a witness.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and we'll be talking again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thank you. Take care. Okay. Bye.